And David.
Thank you. So we have quite a lot of questions, so we'll race through. The first one is from Joyce, and she is asking about the Safarti family of Salonika, Thessaloniki, today in northern Greece. And she says, my family was from Salonika. The family name I'm trying to learn more about is Safarti. I'm sorry if I keep stopping. I have to keep admitting people into the room. My male Safarti cousin had a Y DNA test and matched several Ashkenazi men. 3 of them had family histories going back to France. And I'm thinking that Safarti family was from France, hence the name, and went to Spain in the Middle Ages. And she's trying to work out also if the family come from Amsterdam or had come from Amsterdam to Salonika. So the first thing to say is that there may be several Safarti families, and they may not be related. Joyce talks about Y DNA, and I think we will several times this evening mention the Avotenu DNA study, which you can find on the family tree DNA website, because there are different accuracies of DNA tests. So it depends if somebody was just, say, testing, I'm not a geneticist, but say testing sort of 12 points on the genome, that's going to find many more relatives than a more sort of detailed test. So we don't quite know how closely related they are to the people in France. So I would certainly send your male cousin to the Avotenu DNA people. The earliest reference to Safartis that I could find, and this was looking in Alexander Bider's book on the subject, and of course Alexander was a previous speaker here. The earliest ones I could find were actually in Italy. I mean, obviously part of that Sephardic world. So I would guess, and again this is pure speculation, but it seems more likely they would have traveled from Italy to Thessaloniki than from Amsterdam. The problem, of course, is that the Salonika archives were basically destroyed during the fire in 1917, so it's quite difficult. But my first suggestion would be to go to the Avotenu DNA people, because they may already have tested Safartis from Amsterdam, or indeed from Morocco or someone else. And of course, if there is a close match, that is quite a good indication. So I hope that helps. Tom.
Yes, there was a question about the Carlo family. Do we have any ideas about the origins of the Carlo family? They are supposedly Sephardic, and maybe they are related to the Italian Carlonimus family. Yes, they were Sephardic. They married in the Portuguese Jewish community of Amsterdam. Their ketubas are registered there, so that's a positive. And looking through through some files today, I found that in the beginning of the 18th century, there were actually 2 families, Carlo. And the first one begins with Salomo Carlo and Judith Bernal. And he had 4 or 5 sons and 1 daughter. And the daughter is Hannah Carlo, and she married with Benjamin Carlo. And Benjamin Carlo belongs to the 2nd Carlo family in Amsterdam at that time. And his father was called Moses. So if you can have the 2nd slide, then I can explain. Moses Carlo and Sarah Israels have maybe 3 children. One is Benjamin, who married Ghana from the other Carlo family. The other is Rafael Carlo. And the third one is possibly Michael Carlo. And that's the ancestor of many of the Carlos that follow in Amsterdam later. But he is speculative. I don't know for sure if he is a son of Moses Carlo and Sarah Israels, because he there is no ketubah from him, so there's no record of his father's name. We only have a marriage in Amsterdam, which says that the couple that married is from The Hague. Michael Carlo himself was from Amsterdam, but the marriage ban does not have many specifics. However, on the basis of the fact that Michael Carlo had a son, Moses, we can speculate that his father was also a Moses. And if we go back to the first family, that is Salomon Carlo, he is from Livorno. And my suggestion is that you go to Livorno and search for the Carlo family in Livorno. Last year, 2 years ago already, the book Ketubot of Livorno was published. And this book has many references to Carlos. So that would be a starting point. And the second starting point would be birth registers of the Jewish community of Livorno of the second half of the 17th century. And there you might find the birth of this Solomon and the other one, Moses. And that's it for the moment, David.
Thank you. So the next question is from Steve, and it is about Monastery in today Northern Macedonia, which used to be, which is now called actually Bitola. And we'll actually have a question also later about the other monastery in Morocco. And Steve says that his maternal grandparents left Monastery, then the Ottoman Empire, in the 1910s. He can't find their birth certificates, which, to be honest, is not very surprising. And he's puzzled why none of the 3,100 souls from Monastery who died in Treblinka had surnames matching either of his grandparents. So it's an opportunity to give a little information on Monastery, and hopefully at some future date we can have a talk about it. And this was in the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire, and Sephardim sort of arrived there in the 16th century from what is ports in what is now Albania. And it was quite a mixed city. There were sort of Turks, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Greeks, and of course, Jews. Much of the city was destroyed in the fire in 1863. And in 1903, there was an uprising there. And this was a contested city between the sort of the Greeks and the Bulgarians and the Serbs, each of who thought they should have it. And this ethnic violence between these groups was one of the causes of Jewish emigration. The Serbs conquered the city in 1912 during the Balkan Wars. And at the start of the 20th century, there were about 11,000 Jews living there. But by 1914, the population had been reduced by half, possibly, consequential to these wars, and also because Monastery was sort of at the end of a railway line from Salonika, which after the Ottomans were kicked out, found themselves in two different countries. So the city, first of all, obviously suffered during the Balkan Wars. And the First World War, it changed hands twice and was also heavily bombarded twice. And by the end of the First World War, the Jewish population was down to 3,000. And in the 1920s and 1930s, Zionism was very strong there. And so about 300 of the young people left. So whilst I can't definitively answer Steve's question, I think we can observe, but by the time the Second World War happened, probably around 80% of the original Jewish population had left, and it's just entirely possible that, you know, if the family had slightly unusual names, that those families had thank God had all left. So that's the best answer, I'm afraid, I can offer to Steve on that. It is though very speculative. Tom.
There's a question from Gary about the Deschere family. His oldest Deschere ancestor is Yehuda Deschere. And he suspects that this Yehuda Deschere was a second illegal son of Diego Texeira, who was called Abraham Texeira when he returned to Judaism. So there could have been a name change from Texeira to Deschere, which would, as Aaron Sterk once remarked, have been a very possible Germanized form of Texeira. We do not have any documents that prove this. All the Texeira, the Matos family trees, do not mention Yehuda Deschere. And we do not know if Yehuda was indeed the second and illegitimate son of Diogo. It does not help that the notarial archives of Hamburg burned in 1844, but there are the archives, the notarial archives of Amsterdam from that period, and I suggest that you keep an eye on that one. It might be possible that eventually a notarial deed comes to light that mentions this Yehuda Deschere, because the Sephardim were not shy about illegitimate sons. They did not sweep them under the carpet. Mostly they recognized them and they got a part of the inheritance. We don't know if that happened in this case, but the outcome of this research is unsure. David?
Thank you. And Joyce, you joined us after we addressed your question, so you'll have to watch it later on YouTube. I thought to answer the next two questions together. These are from Doris and from Michael. Doris has a family tradition that her Pintus family from Poznan were of Pinto descent, and is asking about why DNA tests and searching in Amsterdam. Malcolm is interested in the De Freitas family, who again have an ancestral tradition of coming from Portugal. So I'm afraid I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record, but first of all, that we had a meeting, I think last November, where Ton, Randy Schoenberg, and myself were talking about traditions of Sephardic ancestry in the Ashkenazi world. And the truth is, we are a bit skeptical, but the Avatenu DNA project has turned up, I think, a few examples, and it's certainly worth investigating. And even if they're Ashkenazi, I think it's still worth investigating. So what I would suggest in both cases is to get both a Pintus and a De Freitas and ask them to test with family tree DNA and then share the results with the Avatenu DNA project. So yeah, Tom.
Yes, let's go back to the Texeira family and the Texeira family, because Florvela has researched the Texeira family in Hamburg, and maybe can shed some light on that.
Not in Hamburg, but in Antwerp. But they are also in Hamburg. Yes, but in Antwerp there are a very important family called Texeira Sampaio that is connected with the Veiga family and the Ximenes family also. So, it is a very important family with connection with the commerce in the West Indies, and they patronized arts in Antwerp and other pious works, I think, mainly connected with orphans and widows in Antwerp. So maybe there is a connection, I don't know, maybe not, but I think, sorry.
Well, the family has been well researched, I think. And if someone would have found Yehuda Texeira, he would have been mentioned in one of the many publications about this family. So it's still possible, but not very likely, I think.
Maybe there is one user, I don't know.
Okay. David?
So we now move to Monastery, Morocco, and we have quite a complicated question from Rebecca. Just to summarize it, I can't find any records of my second great grandfather. He is listed in Genealogy Hebraica as Salomon Ohana or Barhana, which I think is a mistake. And then, so essentially what we have here is a family of Moroccan origin, which is in Portugal. And Rebecca's looking around for sources. So I would certainly suggest consulting the French Jewish genealogy group, the Cercle de Genealogie Juive, because obviously France has a much greater interest in Morocco than the English-speaking world. Also on Facebook, I won't share because one of my friends has just sent me a message. Raquel Levi Toledano's group, Genealogie des Juifs du Maroc, which is actually, despite the French name, is a bilingual group, is always a good place to go. And of course, I would refer you to both to Jacob Marachi and also to his talk that he gave us on the Jews of Morocco. But I think what's quite a sort of salient point to take from this is Sephardic families are all over the place. So you can probably sort of widen your research. So very likely there's a connection with Gibraltar. And Joshua Marachi, who's actually uncle of Jacob Marachi, and Gina Marks, I know have researched Gibraltar wills, which might be a good way of sort of building up the families. Both of those belong to the Sephardic diaspora group on Facebook, so you can find them there. And also, of course, just to check in the archives of sort of Gibraltar and Portugal and Spain and Britain and so forth. I mean, this is just a very simple search in the Portuguese National Archives on Ben Sabat, which is one of the names that Rebecca mentioned. And this is a Joseph Ben Sabat. But here we can see that his father is a Salamal. Likewise, if we go to the National Archives here in the UK, I mean, who knows all, I mean, that's quite recent, but who knows who some of these people are. And I think it's just useful to remember that sometimes when we can't go up, if we go out, we'll discover relatives, and then the whole family will start to make more sense. So that's my best suggestion there. Tom.
Yes, and the question from Anne about Abraham Alvarez da Paz. He married Sarah Lopez Albin in London in 1730. There were no children of this marriage, and it must have been a second marriage, as his two sons, Jacob and Isaac, married in 1732, just 2 years after his own marriage. What I think this means is that Abraham Alvarez da Paz came to London in 1730, and his marriage to Sarah Lopez Albin is a remarriage. He was already married somewhere else, and he came to London, returned to Judaism, took the name Abraham, and remarried his wife, Sarah Lopez Albin. So he must have been married before, and from the fact that his sons marry only 2 years later, I would say that he was married circa 1700, 1710. Maybe his name is in the lists called Vindos do Portugal. They are in an article written by Edgar Samuel. And I don't know if his name is in that article because I can't find it again, sorry. But it must be findable, and we can check if he is in there. If not, then he may have come from somewhere else, or still from Portugal or Spain. And also married a last will of his son, translated from Italian. So they might have come from Italy as well. Probably you have a copy of that will, because it is a translation from Italian. And I have a bit of news. All these wills that you find in the National Archives of London are translated or are copies from original wills. And the original wills are also still there. And I know of someone who, for a fee, goes to the National Archives and photographs them. So send me a mail or a PM, and I will give you his name. His price is modest, and then you will have the original name. with also the original signature and maybe an original seal, which also may tell you something about the family. And then I don't know where to look for next if he is not in the windows do Portugal. It could be from anywhere, but further research is always possible. And also keep an eye on the notarial archives in Amsterdam because they are adding records every few weeks to their database. David?
Thank you. So this question is from Susan, and it's asking about whether a family in England might have been of Jewish descent, and this is a family of shipbuilders, some of whom went to the colonies to Salem, Massachusetts in the 17th century. First thing I just comment upon is that Susan uses the word crypto-Jews, which I have to say I don't much care for, because crypto-Jews sort of implies that people were secretly practicing Judaism, which is much more difficult to know, often impossible to know. So I have to say I prefer the official Catholic term of New Christians or just conversos. The answer to the question, because she's asking generally about whether there were sort of people of Jewish ancestry in England before Cromwell, and I think the answer is yes. There were a few that are known of. Most famously, the Dr. Lopez, who was a doctor to Queen Elizabeth I, and was accused of treason and was hung, drawn, and quartered. I think, though, it's unlikely that a Quaker family of shipbuilders with a very English name had Jewish ancestry. But what I would suggest, if you're continuing to research them, is to contact the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich in London, because this is really outside our area of expertise, and they hopefully can then sort of direct you towards people who know what they're talking about on the subject, which I'm afraid I do not. Tom, shall I quickly squeeze another one in? This is from Judy, who is a distant relative of mine, so hi. And she's interested in a Leo Mendoza, great-grandfather, immigrated to Mexico from Spain. Grandmother is 103 and has many stories, so please record those stories, ideally with a video, and just ask as many questions as you possibly can. And he's interested in finding out about his family history and if he has Jewish ancestors. And she's asking really where the records are, which again is not really our subject. I mean, at this distance, probably most people in Spain or Portugal have a Jewish ancestor somewhere, but I think the surname Mendoza was quite unusual amongst Jews and quite common amongst others. So I think there's no obvious connection there. What I would suggest is Daniel Smith Ramos, who was a speaker, I'm not sure, I think last year, on this group, has set up this magazine, Descendencias, which is, I believe, the first sort of regular Spanish magazine on genealogy. And I would assume in Mexico, presumably, there are both church and civil records, and obviously Spain, the records are quite patchy there, but it's certainly worth trying. So my best bet would be to start with Daniel's magazine, and see where that leads. Ton, do you have any others?
David has a question about the family Silvera, Atias de Silvera, his ancestors, and if you can put that PowerPoint.
Can I share,
Yeah.
Don?
Yeah, David, can David?
Yeah. Also, I beg your pardon.
Okay, you asked for brick walls, and I've got one for you. I guess I've been working in it for a number of years, and Florabella knows about this too. So she hasn't got an answer for me yet, but maybe a combined heads here, we find a way to break forward. Moses died in Jamaica in 1698 in San Diego de la Vega, now known as Spanish Town, and he was one of the early burials in the cemetery there. And his epitaph said, you know, it was in Portuguese, and he said he was Portuguese. So we'd really like to know a lot more than that. We really want to know where he was born, who his parents were, where did he live before, and how did he get to Jamaica. And when I visited this voyage of 2 or 3 months on a rough sea in a sailing school, and I think to myself, well, that's a terrible journey to take for anybody. But he did, and somewhere along the line he got married, and we do know that in about 1675 he married Esther Cohen-Dillon. Between 1680 and 1692 he fathered 7 children with Esther. He was naturalized in Jamaica to be a planter in 1684. Now, from 1660 onwards, there were several arrangements made in England whereby you could go to Jamaica and other colonies, and you'd be given some land and you'd be able to be naturalized. And he took one of those opportunities in 1684. I know he visited Bevis Marks in 1692 and 1693, and his son Abram, his last son, who is my 4th great-grandfather, was circumcised when he was 2 years old at Bevis Marks. But he wrote his will. Moses wrote his will in Portuguese, and this has been looked at by a couple of people who said this doesn't look like Portuguese. Well, it was written hand, obviously, and somewhere in 1920-ish, someone typed it up, and that's what we have today. So we have a typed transcription of a handwritten Portuguese will, which, if you're not familiar with Portuguese, is really hard to do. We're doing some today and finding that difficulty, the formation of characters, spelling. And so it is a form of Portuguese, or could be a form of Portuguese. We do have that. You'll notice at the bottom that Dr. Jacob Rodriguez de Leon was a signature to this will, a witness, and he was. And a few weeks ago, we had one of his descendants on this program. So the community was pretty small at that time. Da Costa, Alvaranga, Idana, all known names that were around. So he did have a rather large, modest family for 7 kids. But he was great-grandfather to many Jamaican families. You mentioned his name in Jamaica, and a lot of people claim heritage from him. And you can see at the top, he married Esther. Her father, Abram, wrote his will in Spanish, and I have his will. I have Esther's will, and so on. So his children seem to have had some affiliation with England. One married Pereira de Azevedo, who is a Parnas in Jamaica. Messiah's family, I think, bears in London somewhere. Tavares certainly does, and so on. So there's some commonality with England here, but not been able to establish his origin as English. He was obviously fluent in Portuguese and not in English. So some tantalizing hints, and Florabella will recognize these. Mose da Silvera, with alias Antonio, and Jacob Atayasa, they've got some of the names. Francisco Vaz de Castro, reported to be in Hamburg in 1644 in the Inquisition. They were betrayed by Giorgio de Lima. And Flor Bellam, in one of our recent papers, talked about Antonio da Silvera as a Portuguese merchant. I'm not sure the dates fit for him in Flor Bellam's research. And he did mention the name Antonio da Silvera is mentioned in several processes. So if he did have, if that was indeed his alias, there are several processes that reference that name. But there are no processes with Matthias mentioned, no 17th century processes. So I'm not sure that Matthias was a big name in Portugal. Certainly Silvera was. So got processors reviewing. I started on the first one and using some of the digital techniques that we're working on to try and transcribe. We're going to try and get a new model and see if I can improve on that transcription. But we have some potential work here where the name, but there's no guarantee that this is even family, but because of the naming conventions. And then so my final thought is the answer already in someone else's family tree that's listening in here along the way? I found a snippet from a family tree for a family called Cotterill. I was never able to get past this snippet to figure what they had, but it suggested that he might have been born in 1618 in Asturias in Spain, but I don't know that at all. So just to throw out, has somebody else got him in a family tree and solved the problem? Over to you, David.
Over to you, Ton.
Can I say something?
Yes.
First of all, the will was transcribed by someone who didn't know even paleography or Portuguese, because there are several words that doesn't exist at all. And then what I can say about Atias da Silveira, what I can say is the Silveira was Portuguese, because the will is in Portuguese, not in Spanish. And what I can say, I found some people with Silveira in the name in Hamburg, but I'm collecting information about those families in Hamburg and doing a family tree and comparing all the family trees if there are some connections between them. I hope you understand my English. And then another thing that I found about Silveira, and it's I don't know if it will give some result or not, but I found that Anani that were among the people who served Dona Catarina de Bragança, the Queen of England, Anani was called Águeda da Silveira. Maybe this nanny has some connection with the Silveira Atias. Of course, there are no Atias in the files in the processes of Inquisition, because Atias is a Jewish surname, and we don't find any Jewish surname in the processes, because all the Jewish were baptized and they have Christian names. They are Silveiras, they are Mendes, they are Lopes, they are everything, but not with Jewish surnames such Atias. Okay, so it's what I know at the moment. That's with too little, but it's all I know.
Can I just add one snippet to that? And when you think about Hamburg, we know I'm glad you found information on Matthias and Silvera in Hamburg. I wasn't able to find very much, but the Matthias family was big there because there's several buried in Hamburg, in the cemeteries in Hamburg, but there are no Da Silvera was buried in a cemetery in Hamburg, which was an interesting bit of information.
So, but the Moses Matthias de Silvera was contemporary of Moses Israel Matthias, and maybe there is a connection, but I cannot find that connection. But this Moses Israel Matthias was a very important person in London because he had a synagogue in London. So it's another thing that we can follow or not, but I didn't find anything that connected those two people, Moses Matthias de Silvera and Moses Israel Matthias. And Moses Israel Matthias was from Hamburg.
Right.
So we have several things that we have to connect the dots, but at the time we only have the dots.
I have a question, David. You mentioned that Moses Matthias de Silvera visited London in 1693 and 1694.
Yeah.
Who do you know?
How do you know? Bevis Marks records.
Yeah. And
those
the same person?
The 1694 was recorded in one of the Bevis Marks books as in the additional circumcisions, but 1692 was and 3. I searched and found that in the Forasteros, and he was a forastero, and he gave a sefer, whatever that meant at the time, for contribution. So we still got. I mean, one of my notes here is I'm working my way through the oldest Bevis Marks record books, because that's a possibility. Things that have not been transcribed so far.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm racking my brains to think of another possible avenue to follow. I don't think he is from Amsterdam or Hamburg, because we don't find the name Matthias de Silvera there. But there are other cities in the diaspora, like Livorno or Bordeaux. Maybe we have to look there, because the will is in Italian, so that will be a reason to look in Italy. And many people from Jamaica came from Bordeaux. That's in this or the said in the book about Jamaica by what's his name? He gave a lecture with us, David.
Yes, and
the book about Jamaican wills.
Stanley Marvis.
Stanley Marvis, yes. He pointed out that there were a lot of connections between Bordeaux and Jamaica.
Well, the other piece that was interesting is that Moses married a Coindillion, and her father wrote his will in Spanish. And Coindillion, there was a Coindillion in Barbados who died in Moses Coindillion, who died in 1675, and again, there's it would seem there's some possible connection with Britain, just because they were able to go and get the naturalization, take the opportunity for naturalization. So it suggests that something may have been coordinated through Britain or the other colonies. Anyway, I think we've spent a lot of good time on this, and appreciate it.
Thank you. So Judith asked quite a lot, but to boil it down, she's interested in finding the origins of her Rodriguez family in London. And of course, Rodriguez is an extremely common name. Assuming that she has already been through the various circumcision, birth, ketubot, burial records, my best suggestion would be the work that David Silvera just referenced, which he and Ali Ergensoy are leading in terms of making the accounts books of the congregation accessible. And these are sort of handwritten books in Portuguese, and they're using sort of artificial intelligence to work out what is written there, and then hopefully it will become searchable. And my hope is that in due course, this mountain of extra information will then be able to tell us, which Rodriguez is which. She references Ali's talks on the Gomez da Costa, and I'm afraid this seems to be about the one meeting that Ali hasn't come to. So I'm afraid I can't advise on that, but I've emailed him, so maybe he can. Ton, I don't know, did you look at Judith's messages? I'm not sure if there's much more to be.
No, there's not much more to add. She should not only look at the annual accounts, but also at minute books of versus marks. That's a long shot, but you never know. The Mahamat of versus marks, like the one in Amsterdam, took an active interest in the lives of their members. And it also often happened that families made a request to the Mahamat, and you will find the answers to such requests in the minute books. So that might also be a place to look.
Thank you. And so Maya asks that my brick wall I've looking at is to see where the first Bellam came from before living in Plymouth in England. The first mention is from Sasa and his thesis, and he mentions Mattathias Bellam ben Elijah. Sounds a bit Ashkenazi to me, to be honest. Archives not digitized. She had her brother Y-DNA tested, which is always a smart thing to do. And it turned out he belonged to a rare group, E-M96, but it doesn't tell much, and the Avatenu project didn't really have much on that group. I have no idea, Tom, do you? I mean, is this family, do you think, even Sephardic? Could Bellam just be a coincidence?
It will not have been a coincidence. Last names are never a coincidence. But it's not coincidental with Sephardim. I remember this discussion on the Sephardic diaspora from some years ago, in which Aaron Sterk suggested that Bellam might have been expanded from Bellam. And Bellam, with one L or two L's, is a village or a little town in Germany. And it might be wise to look there. But I have no idea of any surviving records of that city or village. That's one. The second suggestion I would like to make is that that she could look in local archives in Plymouth and Dartmouth, because local archives are often gold mines of information on individuals, citizens. They may have land records, they may have tax records, they may have requests from citizens to the city magistrate. Delving into them will surely give you extra information and maybe also about where he came from.
Also, of course, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain has is an excellent resource, and they have a very good library. They also have a Facebook group, so perhaps ask the question there. You know, it might be German, and Jeanette Rosenberg is the expert on German Jews, and she's British as well, so maybe that's an overlap. So they could be Sephardic, they could be Ashkenazi, they could be both, who knows. Ton, are there any more questions or comments on Zoom, or we can go to YouTube?
There's a question from Bernard about sources for Antwerp. And I believe that Flor Bellam, who is with us today, may be able to answer that one.
Do we know anyone who's written a book on that subject? Flor Bellam. Flor Bellam, do you want to
about what? Sorry?
Sources for genealogical research in Antwerp.
Sources.
Yeah, do we know anyone who's written a book on Antwerp, for example?
No. Swasu, maybe. Swasu?
No, sources, references.
Sources about Antwerp.
Notaries.
They are not. Sorry. They are notarial books that we can search, and we have several information in the National Library in Antwerp. So, and also in Portugal, we have several documents about Portuguese community in Antwerp, that it was New Christian community, but there are information about those people that are connected with other communities, such as Amsterdam or Hamburg or Venice or Livorno or else. So because Antwerp community had several people that had Jewish ancestors, but they did not reconvert to Judaism, but they had family that did that conversion. So there are information that of the basis of the family, and that connects all the communities in Europe, and also in the India or other places. So did I answer your question?
If I may add to that, those notarial registers from Antwerp are online in good quality. So you may research them, and because the Jews in Antwerp had to pretend they were Catholics, they baptized their children. And there are also Catholic baptism records and marriage records that have the names of these members of the Portuguese nation.
Yes, and they are sorry. They are also they were also in the churches, buried in the churches, and but the family of those people that sometimes came to Antwerp were in Amsterdam or in Hamburg, and they also buy kasher meat from Amsterdam and other places. So they are a very strange connection in between Amsterdam, Hamburg, and Antwerp. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah. If I may add, there's more than enough to research for years to come.
Yes.
And of course, Florbela wrote the book about Nassau Portuguesa, the Antwerp.
Yes, you can buy it.
Yes.
I have it here.
Yes.
Okay, but this community is a new Christian community, so people mainly were Christians. Some.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I know of one lady, Gracia Pimentel, and she wrote her last will, and she excluded from her will everyone who lived in the lands of idolatria.
Yeah.
Only in her case, she did not mean Spain or Portugal, but the enemies of Spain and Portugal.
Yes.
But she herself was a good Catholic. But
yes, there are several cases several cases, because one person that was connected with the rabbi in Amsterdam went to Lisbon, and he gave a list of people to the Inquisition that were Jewish in Amsterdam, and so the fear was that those people were catched by Inquisition and had to tell everything about the communities elsewhere. Okay, so it is a very, it is fear of being discovered, and those people could do some harm to the people in Amsterdam, because they were also priests that went to the communities to see what they were doing and to see the people who were there, so they could persecute them and the family in Portugal. So it's a very difficult time to live. Okay, so it's a fear that could have consequences to the people that live there and in Portugal also, and they could be exploited of their possessions.
There's a question on Zoom from Howard. Some older family trees prepared by older historians, Edgar Samuel, Hans Paul, state that early Amsterdam merchant Duarte Fernandes, great-grandfather of Spinoza, was the brother of Luis Fernandes of Antwerp, consul of the Portuguese nation there. More recent recent essays do not mention this supposed relationship. Is the relationship between Duarte and Luis now rejected or just not proven properly? I think it's the latter. And is there another question? No, that's it from Zoom.
So we have a number of questions on YouTube. Several from Mrs. Roger Rabbit. So shall we just go through those? Did the Sephardim in Amsterdam go straight there from Spain? I mean, well, Spain and Portugal. I think the answer to that is in some cases they did. In some cases they may have gone through sort of Bordeaux or Bayonne or Rouen or Antwerp, and other transit points are available. She mentions that her husband's family were from Aleppo, in which case I suggest contacting, if you need any help, Serena Roffe, ROFFE, who is a specialist on the community in Aleppo. We have a Nagar that appears out of nowhere at the turn of the century. I'm guessing that's the same as Nedja, as in Alain Nedja, who's spoken to us, so maybe speak to him on that. Edward asks, do we know if members of the Rodriguez da Costa family who ended up in Jamaica in the early 1700s were of Sephardic origin? I would assume yes, Tom.
I was distracted. Can you
pause?
Oh,
I do beg your pardon. There was a Rodriguez da Costa family who arrived in Jamaica in the early 17th century, and Edward's asking if they're Sephardic. I can't see where else they might come from.
Well, he can look for if there were epitaphs on the gravestones. In a book named The Jews of Jamaica, which has a lot of inscriptions on gravestones. And if they appear in that book, then they are Sephardic. If not, then the graves may have been lost. We don't know. And in a few weeks' time, we will have a meeting about Jamaican cemeteries. So join us then and put your question there.
Thank you. So next question is from Drone Dogs. I'm of the Pimentel family and have genetic DNA from Spain and Portugal. I've been told of Sephardic Jewish background. There is a Sephardic Pimentel family, although I would assume statistically most Pimentels are not of Jewish origin. And I'm afraid I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think the Avatenu Y-DNA project is a good place to start, especially if they've already tested Jewish Pimentel men, although of course there may be more than one Jewish Pimentel family. I think that is all of the questions.
There's a new question on Zoom. Yeah. The chat is the family name Masha. No, does the family name Masha appear in Holland, Belgium, and England? That name appears indeed in Holland and England. I don't know about Belgium, but the variant Messia, which I assume may have been the same family, is all over the place. It comes from Morocco, it appears in England, Amsterdam, Bordeaux, Jamaica, almost any place where Sephardim lived, you find Messiahs. If they are all from the same family, that I don't know.
Thank you. And I don't know, there's more questions here. Can I just invite those who are joining us on YouTube, if they want to become patrons, they just go to the Patreon website, and we're patreon.com/Sephardi, and it would be really nice if you could join us there. Does anybody else have any more questions, statements.
You can raise your hand now.
Oh, sorry, we have a question here. When reading sources from previous centuries, why are Sephardic Jews described as dark or swarthy? Are sources hinting that these Jews were actually black or olive complexion Iberians? I think probably, I mean, of course, it depends which sources, but I think, I remember reading that most British soldiers volunteering for the First World War were described as having mousy coloured hair. So I suspect anyone arriving with dark hair might be described as being swarthy, but I can't promise to that.
Can I say
Bernard.
something?
Yes, of course.
Sorry, there is some people with hand, but I will tell you that I found in Inquisition files and documents there is absent list of people who were absent from the villages in Portugal, and they describe people so they could be identified in other places. And what I saw, it is that most of course have more dark skin, or the idea that people think of Iberian Jews, that they had a dark skin and so on. But if you saw that list, you can see that they are dark skin, light skin, blonde, red hair, blue eyes, brown eyes, black eyes, everything. They are thin, they are fat, they are tall, they are so we cannot say that the Iberian Jews have a typical face or a typical body or a typical hair. No, we cannot say that. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Florida. That's
Yes, my ancestor was described as having yellow eyes, which wasn't very complimentary. But Bernard, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's just to say that I have, and it needs checking out, and it's not a line that I have followed, but on Jeannie, I have an 11th great grandmother who was the Maria Pimentel, and she was the mother of Simon Gomes da Paz. So it's a kind of an interesting line. To 2 generations below her, I've checked out the documentation. So there are 2 generations that I would need to check to be sure that it's reliable, but it just shows her as being estimated born between 1540 and 1600. But I thought that might be helpful.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just looking for questions somewhere else. And Francis, you have a question?
Yes, just to say that although I've got dark hair, my Sephardi relatives were extremely noisy, yelling in Arabic and French, and were pretty dark skinned. I've put it in the chat, and it made me deeply envious. I had to get suntanned every summer, and I desired and wished to look like them, because it was within the Jewish communities of Manchester, something quite full of signals and beauty, and clearly quite particular. That's all, really.
Thank you. So there's an extremely long question in the Sephardic diaspora group, but I think I'll leave that for another time. Ton, shall we?
yes.
Unless anybody else has any more questions, shall we close up?
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to our viewers on YouTube. Thank you to our patrons who make all of this possible. And we hope to see you next week. And David, can you remind me who our speaker is?
I was hoping you could remind me.
We do have a speaker, though.
A speaker of absolute high excellence, but that will have to remain a mystery until next Wednesday. I'm sorry, it's been a very long day today.
Okay, if you have a few seconds, I should be able to look him up.
Thank you for the invitation, and I hope I could give some information, good information too.
Yeah, and Florbella's book is of course available on Amazon and hopefully from all good booksellers.
And next week we have Hugo Martins about the Nassau in Hamburg. And he will speak about the history of the Sephardim in Hamburg because of the release of his new book, Nassau in Hamburg. It has appeared in Italian and it will appear in English, I believe. We are very much looking forward to that and to his talk. Thank you all. Join us next week.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.